name is Jill Solomon. I'm from Montreal. And I got to this conference through the pressuring of my doctor, my Tourette doctor, Dr. Dion. It was like about 3 weeks to a month of anticipation. And I was finally here, and I look around the room, and it's like, now what do I do? To me, this had been the culmination of, like, I knew I was coming here. Once I paid the registration fee and the check went through, I knew I was coming. I closed the blinds, I shut the lights, and I just took a nap. I was overwhelmed.
I'm Jay Tomlinson, and I have Tourette syndrome. This is my wife, Stacy, and this is our first conference that we've attended with the foundation. The main attraction for us to come to this conference was the inclusion of the Adult Issues Forum. I've met a few other adult people with Tourette's, but it was very interesting for us to come to be part of that discussion and meet a wider range of people and see what their issues are and if it's similar to what Stacy and I have experienced.
Okay, my name's Daryl Ball. And the reason I enjoy going to conferences is because I love meeting other adults with Tourette's, and I love seeing children smile. And that brings the biggest relief to me is people seeing acceptance in what they do have and how they move on in style in the world.
My name is Shannon Rogers, and I was diagnosed with Tourette syndrome when I was 12 years old. I've been to conferences on and off since then until now, and I guess the main reason that I go is for peer group and social contact with others with Tourette syndrome.
I'm Gord Brown from Kitchener, Ontario. I'm also regional chapter president of our local chapter. So when I go to conferences, I'm taking back information, the latest news and statistics to our local chapter. But since I've had adult issues stamped on my forehead for a number of years, meeting other adults and in taking a leadership role in adult issues, much as this forum and speaking engagements that were at this past one.
This afternoon at 3 o'clock we will be having an adult issues forum.
I don't need to hear this one talk. I don't want to talk about genetics. I don't want to talk about this. I just want to know what it feels like to be able to sit in a room with other people with Tourette syndrome and have them say it's okay to have Tourette syndrome.
Grade 1, I was acting up, so my teacher put me in the back room next to her desk. That's when I found out I need glasses, so contacts now. And a couple times in grade 4, my grade 4 teacher taped my nose shut with masking tape just to sort of shut me up. She also took me over her knee a few times in whatever room was available and empty, which was okay in the late 60s and early 70s, but would never go over today.
My Tourette has always been my own secret. It's been my own problem. Once you let something out, it becomes something that other people have opinions about, that you're going to get feedback from them. I didn't know if I was ready for that, to be able to put something out into the open.
Jay had always had mild tics from when we met, and then after being married for a couple of years, we decided we're going to have children, and we got pregnant. And then it just became more of an issue of, I wonder what these are.
It was mild tics and mild symptoms. Didn't really display any symptoms until I was about 18. During my adolescent years, it wasn't a big issue with my family, but as we moved on in life, stress is a big issue with it. So as I moved into the university and then marriage and kids and stress level up and up and up, the tics became more and more visible. And
not just stress, stimulus. If you're in a place with a lot of other things going on, or a lot of children running around, or a lot of loud noises, it's not really stress, you get overstimulated, so then that brings on more tics. Yeah. So, but you get used to them.
You try to.
Well, I get used to
tics,
them.
yes.
I ignore them.
Prior to this conference, I'd only met 1 or 2 other adults with Tourette's. Most of the other support groups were generally parents dealing with issues through school and education and whatnot. So coming here was very exciting, to be in a peer group to find other adults and determine what issues they had that they had to deal with.
I'll tell you why I go to conferences. We're not speakers. We're still part of the Tourette Syndrome Foundation, but we do speak on behalf of the foundation, and we speak on how our behaviors are. Yeah. We might have doctors in front of our names, but we do have the experience.
We are knowledgeable to speak on these topics. Even though we're not trained physicians, we have the insight. There is information out there, and that's what gives us our validity in speaking, is our experience, our knowledge, our history, as well as the information out there.
Whatever the doctor or the speaker is not given the information they want, we could fill them in. We don't do diagnosis.
Yeah, we do education, information, and strategies.
Now, there's a line that we won't cross that, doctors and professionals are above, that, we will not talk about medication, we will not talk about, say, anything to do with advice or things like that, but just in terms of the fact that we've been through it, we live Tourette syndrome every day, that's how we can't really judge other Touretters and how they deal with things, but, we sort of have an idea what they're going through.
I've looked at the agendas for all the other conferences and I've never seen adult forum, so I didn't spend the money or the time to go, because I said, what am I just going to sit there in an audience and listen to things that I've heard or read or whatever? But I didn't get on the plane for nothing.
As a chapter president, I will go to conferences to pick up a lot of information so I can bring it back to my home region as well, but really that's one of the keys, is going and meeting the peers, as you mentioned. And this year, with the first real year we had an adult issues forum.
I think it's happened informally a lot. There's a lot of informal conversations that have always happened. The adults have gotten together in the hallway or on the side or after the fact, and that's where the really good conversations happen. It's not necessarily when there's a speaker. So much of the focus is on kids, which is relevant, and getting kids diagnosed and support and education out there and the support networks and teachers. But there's also that whole set of issues that we have to deal with, that things change. Like there's school and you deal with peers. Okay, I'm through school, I'm done. Then you've got to get a job and deal with your landlord. And it's all those things that we're constantly dealing with, that it's nice to talk with people. And even if you're doing okay, to understand that somebody else is doing that too, has had the same struggle or a different struggle or has tried a strategy, and having those general conversations goes a long way.
Yeah. My employer's always been really supportive. Sometimes I get on my coworkers' nerves, but other than that, it's pretty well not bad. Anybody else other to add, like the opposite? Nice day. I want to tie her up. Okay, bye.
I have found an arena of slow but gradual support in terms of how the workplace and how the people in the workplace understand and view Tourette's.
My factory just hired 600 people, and some of those people I found out had Tourette syndrome. It's coming up to apply, and then the first advice they asked me says, should I tell them I have Tourette's? And through my experience of working there for 14 years, I said, no, don't tell them you have Tourette's. Because for the simple reason, as Gord said, they just might take your application, put it to the side. Plus, they've had 14 years, 13 years of dealing with me, so I don't want to have a bad experience with them. So, my experience is if you don't say you don't have it, you can hold your ticks, get through your interviews, and get in. At least you have a chance to see what your work style is like before they can judge you on anything else.
That is, if you can control your presentation in the interview situation, which a lot of people can't do, with the anxiety being up, pressure is on, tics can become exacerbated, and so forth. I think we're better off in the long run if we do disclose honestly, and then do so in a format where you have a lot of support around you, either from outside agencies or from employees that you're working with.
For people who are obviously taking an interview or whatever, I think it might be a better idea to disclose. Otherwise, I personally don't see any problem with not disclosing. I don't feel like it's lying or anything, because there's a lot of other stuff about me that I don't necessarily disclose.
I've been a teacher for 10 years. I haven't worked in the last 2 years, but it's like magic. Whenever I've gone for an interview, I don't have any tics. It's like they just stop. My voice, everything becomes normal, and I become somebody without Tourette syndrome. And I feel like I'm deceiving whoever is interviewing me, and if I show up for work when I've been hired because I'm qualified, then have I lied to them? What do? Do I go into an interview and simply stay, you know, in the middle of the interview, yes, I have Tourette syndrome, and do I go into, and if they're not familiar with what it is, do I give them a brief summary overview, or do I say nothing and then wait a few weeks or wait a few days into the job? And to me, that's a big question.
Well, I don't think that you're deceiving them any more than a diabetic needs to. I mean, would be deceiving them if they said they didn't say they received insulin shots. I mean, like, or asthmatic who so they didn't take Ventolin. I mean, who cares? Unless it's going to affect your ability on the job. I mean, you have every opportunity to disclose your special needs later.
When you say diabetes, and some people say they note other disabilities, but those aren't as obvious, and people don't think of them as, they're not stigmatized as much.
That's why they're not stigmatized, because they're not obvious. I mean,
Yeah.
diabetics give themselves shots covertly. I mean, people with Tourette's tick overtly.
You know, I don't think it's at all deceiving not to tick if you don't feel like it, or even to suppress it a bit during an interview. I mean, most people, anybody who's going to an interview wants to put on their best and most professional face. I mean, they dress better than they normally do. I don't think that's suppressing ticks is any more deceptive than just dressing nicer than you normally do for an interview, and then dressing more casually when you get the job.
Or not admitting that you're like a slob at home. I mean, who goes to an interview and says, well, I keep a horrible living room and my bathroom stinks. But you can hire me anyway. Somebody, you're a great employee. Like, you don't have to tell them that.
The interview is actually the hardest thing, because you're right on. It's not like telling somebody on the street who looks at you in a way, oh, well, I have Tourette syndrome, because you have nothing to lose, because it's just a chance meeting. But if this is your livelihood and your job and you're waiting,
You got a 50-50 chance. 50 chance they won't do it, 50 chance they'll accept you. My experience is that if I can hold my ticks, yes, damn you, go long enough, go through an interview. As long as it's not, then I hide myself and tick when I leave, so they don't see me in the car when I am leaving and I am ticking. But the thing is, I find if you can get through your interviews without telling them that you have Tourette's and you get accepted and you start the job, at least you can start informing the people you work with that you have Tourette syndrome and on an acceptance level there.
We talked a lot at the adult forum around what do you say when you're getting a job? How do you tell your employer? When do you tell your employer? And there's some legalities around that. It's not just do I tell or don't you tell? And it's about that employers don't want to discriminate against age, sex, race, religion, disability. So you do not have to legally disclose in your interview. That's all they need to know when they hire you.
Yeah.
Is if you can do the job, you can do the job. The rest of it is irrelevant. So I guess I've recently gone from being an employee to a manager, and I've certainly thought differently about my role. And when I'm hiring somebody, I can't ask them how old they are, if they've got kids, if they have a disability, if they've got any medical conditions. That's all discriminatory based. Or you don't want to be asking those questions, because if you don't hire somebody, they can come back and say, you didn't hire me because of my disability, and it gets into a lot of legal suits and complications. If an employer doesn't know that and asks the questions, you might want to say, yes, I have Tourette syndrome. It has no impact on my ability to do the job, period.
Okay.
Next question. So you can take control of the interview as an employee when somebody asks an inappropriate question.
You've taken courses for human resources.
Yes.
And you found out in the courses in human resources that they teach you about disabilities.
They don't teach us about disabilities. They teach us about what you can and can't ask in an interview. As an employer, you're not taught about disabilities. You're taught about the law. If you're needing some legal accommodation for your disability, the employer may and has the right to ask then for documentation and medical background. You can't just walk in and say, well, I need you to make sure I've got an office with a window and this because of my disability. It has to be documented reasons that you need accommodation for your disability. So there are some legalities. And not everybody knows, like employers don't really know what our needs are. Like somebody in a wheelchair, you know that they need a ramp, or they need a wider doorway, or they need an accessible washroom. But our accommodations are so unique. I think we need to be responsible if we're going in, having our documentation saying, this is the accommodation I need and what it looks like and how.
My compulsive disorder is make sure I do a job right, and I try and get the details in.
Yeah, and you've used it to your advantage. It seems you're quite perfectionist at that.
Because sometimes
Find
too
the
much
way
of
to
a
apply it.
perfectionist.
Yeah.
So sometimes being too much of a perfectionist will slow you down on your job. So you got to find a level where you can just do the one low level and let it go.
I found that the same way, like with sorting the mail. I'll be a perfectionist and the obsessive compulsive will kick in where I can't make any mistakes. And so I'll check bundles 2 or 3 times before I drop them off. And people will be going, oh, a little late today, Posty. And I'm like, yeah, but you're not going to find any mistakes in that bundle. And it's just that it may take a little longer, but the job is going to be done more thorough. And I've been told by senior managers that this same thing is like, hey, you're thorough and that's a good thing.
Yeah, and I think there's some aspects of my job that I know I take twice as long to do because I need to either do it haphazardly or do it back and forth and back and forth. I can't always sit down and do it start to finish, so that might take longer to do it in the way that works for me. So been responsible to say, I need that extra hour to do that. So that's my responsibility. And again, like you've said, you explain to people, hey, it's on time, and you need to check it 3 times. And you're right, it's error-free. But I've also found a job that fits my attention deficit, that I've got a job where I don't have to sit down and do sustained attention at a certain task for so long. I know that that would drive me nuts and I couldn't do that. So in choosing a job that's of interest and of my skill level, I've looked at jobs that fit my neurology. I have had employees come to me with disabilities, but only when it impacts on their job. And as an employer, if they have shown me they can do the job, then they get to do the job until it becomes a factor that impacts on their employment, and then it comes into another whole realm of supervision and accommodation and documentation on that. If you're not able to do your job, I will come to you and say, you're not doing your job. And then I can discipline you based on that.
So what you're basically saying is if you got Tourette's, you better have a strong family doctor standing behind you.
Yeah. Well, not necessarily a strong family doctor, but...
A strong one that believes in you and then gives you structure.
Yeah, and because employers have the right to ask for documentation around any disability.
With coworkers and such, I find that if your ticking or your Tourette's is visible, I find it's important to tell your coworkers and other people around, sooner rather than later, because they are going to ask questions. It's important not to make a big deal about disclosing the fact that you have TS. Oh yeah, it's Tourette's. These are my tics. If you want more information, ask me. I don't swear. I don't do some of the negatives that you may have heard, the myths surrounding Tourette syndrome. It's no big deal. But if you sort of tell them that later, after you've sort of, scared them and made them jump to conclusions, I find maybe their trust level overall may not be as high as if you were sort of upfront with them.
You're right. It's about talking to coworkers, and it's creating a positive work environment for yourself. That I have been proactive after the fact, so I have a positive relationship with my coworkers. So then, when I'm winking or tinking or saying or making noises, they understand what's going on. But that's my own personal.
My coworkers enjoy me. They come up and say, You had the last week off was the most boringest week here. He says you bring light and you bring enlightenment into the department when you come in.
But you've told them what's going on, they understand, and they know the whole background around that, and you've created that positive.
I've created that, and that's what causes the other team members to approach me, because I'm so positive in my aspect of my job.
Yeah, and I think also when we talk about telling coworkers, but if we're positive in our approach and telling other people, those people will be positive as well.
We don't fit the boxes. I can't.
So we need to give them that box. We need to give them that
structure.
You
got to give them some box. You got to give them some box, because I can hide my diabetes, I can hide this, I can hide that, but I can't not hide my Tourette's. For some reason, I can only hold that back for so long before I call somebody a certain this and a certain that, and it does come out.
Yeah, and then people
I
know
have
that.
I have to disclose.
Otherwise, people are going to take offense.
I always think the police are going to come. I live in an apartment building. Sometimes I call them my noises, the sounds that I have to make when I'm alone, and I'm making like shouting sounds. And my neighbor upstairs, I'm so when I walk out of my building, I live sort of in a walk-up 4-story building, and I see him and I look down and I'm thinking one day what if he calls the police, that type of thing, this girl's making me hear these strange sounds coming from her apartment, this bang, I'm banging a cup down and I'm screaming and I'm making a sound, am I going to get arrested, and I have a fear of that. When I walk out of my building in the morning or in the afternoon or in the evening or whenever, my head is always down. I always look down. I never look up. I don't say hi to anybody because I think somebody heard me making my sounds, my noises.
I know. This might be a really good start for discussing with other people, because if they know that you won't have to worry about so much about them calling the police, and then it'll give you practice with discussing it. And they're not your neighbors aren't going to fire you or anything. So.
That's the good idea to have tea and coffee. Bring them down. Bring them down for tea and coffee.
When you leave your building and you see them, you always have your head down.
Always,
That
yeah.
just reinforces to them
I
that
know.
you are weird.
I
They're
know.
part of your life in the sense that
Yeah.
they're living it with you.
I had a speaking engagement a couple of months ago in which probably one of the best ones I've ever done. I was very, very Tourettic that day, ticking as I went in, barking and bouncing off walls literally. And afterwards I got all kinds of people surrounding me, asking questions, saying, hey, this is great. A few weeks later I found out there was an article about the talk written, oh, this is someone to feel sorry for. This is somebody we need to feel sympathy for and pity. And I just flew off the handle of that because this is totally not the image I want to portray at all. I don't want sympathy. I don't want people to feel sorry for me or pity me. I want understanding. Yes, there's a person underneath that Tourette's. Look at the person underneath, not the tics.
I think that's where people know where to put that information, because people have little compartments. He's got a disability, he's had a struggle in life, we need to feel sympathy. It's kind of the logical progression that people put it into, as opposed to he's had a tough life, he's got a disability, he's doing well, and he's successful. Hey, we should feel, and maybe not sympathy, hey, admiration for this person. That's what you were just saying. It's not the sympathy, but people slot that in. Again,
They
if you
don't know
present
how
that.
to state themselves.
So I was at a restaurant, there's a couple Touretters, and it was somebody like you guys who are really loud, and there's some people who were pointing and laughing. I think it was a mom and her daughter. And I was feeling quite upset, so I actually went over and talked to them and gave them the information. They were quite embarrassed.
It's nice
by the
sometimes
fact
to
that
put
I
them on the
caught them.
spot.
Yeah, but again, they didn't know what was going
No.
on, and we present some very bizarre things that
Yeah,
we
we
do,
do.
and very different, and people are going to make assumptions unless we put that out there.
right.
We're not ashamed of what we're doing. If we go out and we're hiding what we're doing or we're avoiding eye contact, people are going to be that much more uncomfortable with what's going on for us.
I've told maybe 5 people in my life, what would be the first thing that you would say?
I think if you go in with a planned format of how you're going to introduce the fact that you do have Tourette syndrome, and if in fact it will impact on you in certain ways that may even be positive in the workplace. Perhaps it will offer the people that you are working for something that they might not otherwise have.
You say you've told about 5 people in your life. I probably tell about 5 people a week.
Practice is an important part of how you do it. And if you get used to and comfortable with discussing it with people that you are only slightly acquainted with and really have nothing to lose for, you'll be a lot more comfortable doing it when it's more important.
When I say 5, I was minimizing it. I've told more people than 5 people. But I don't think one person, and to me this would be a giant relief, I don't think one person that I've told has said, oh, I've heard of Tourette syndrome. Not one person, I'm not exaggerating. So that leaves the onus on me to say, to explain it, and I don't know where to start.
Says I have Tourette syndrome. It's a neurological disorder, and these are some of my tics. I'll explain
So
my
you give
tics to
them
them.
examples by doing the tics?
Doing the tics or
Yeah.
examples of saying them.
How do you feel? Do you feel like
I feel
proud about
relieved.
it? Do
I
you
feel
feel
relieved.
you feel relieved, and then after you do?
I'm not hiding it. But the best part about it all, after I've told everybody I've worked with and they got used to working with me for the last few years, I have people coming up, taking me to the side and says, I think my daughter or my son's got Tourette's, and they start talking to you privately. They open up to you.
That is true.
Because you know how to keep confidential on a lot of stuff.
And kids are a great place to start, because if you tell a child with a multiple exceptionality that you also have an exceptionality, almost all you have to say is, oh, I'm blinking because I have Tourette syndrome. End of story. They have many reasons for their own disabilities and uniquenesses as well. And it doesn't have to be a long, drawn-out disclosure. It can be something quite quiet and unassuming if you wish it to be so, and you can still get a very positive response, and then gradually people may ask you questions and you can educate them through time.
Thing as well, where you might be a better teacher than, say, somebody without Tourette's.
I'm very fortunate that I am in outside sales and direct marketing, because I work at home or I'm on the road, so I can release tics very readily. Yes! But if I am in the office and did a couple of my tics, I have a tongue sticking out tic. And it happens usually on the phone when I'm talking to clients, and if it's a very stressful day, I end up licking the phone. And if people saw that and didn't know, they would think I was crazy and they wouldn't say anything and they would pull back. But as as long as I worked there, I dropped hints. I would leave Tourette information on my desk.
Anonymous Tourette.
And I mean, I would say, oh, well, what's that? And there were some jokes, like one person told me, I have a dog with Tourette, he barks.
Yes, I've had that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's very frustrating, but I think it's also their nervousness. They don't know how to react around you. But if you let them know that you're okay with it, I think they become okay with it. So when I do lick the phone, I even go, damn it, I licked the phone again, and I get my little wipes, and they laugh, or they hand me a Kleenex. So, I think it's a give and take situation, and do it little by little if you want to. You have to find your comfort level with it.
Right. But you find you'll be doing a lot to help other people, because not only are you advocating for yourself, but you're advocating for everybody else in that position, not only who has Tourette's, but in any situation where there are unusual factors, any disabilities, anything that's different from the normal population, the normie population. The bottom line is you can't control all the variables in a job situation, whether it be an interview or a performance situation that you're in. You can't, and never will we be able to nail down all the variables that are involved in acceptance of employees by employers.
Or can you tell how people are going to think about you? I mean, there's always going to be those people that see that see syndromes, or see white canes, or see wheelchairs, and they don't really see the person. I mean, and there are always going to be those kind of people. And you just have to really sort of live in the same world, I guess. And, take it or leave it, really. It's a reality.
I think there's a responsibility issue all across the board in terms of employment issues. I think if you tell people in a work situation, not only are you being responsible to yourself, but you're also, in fairness, giving people an opportunity to have a response to your Tourette syndrome rather than a reaction. Right. If you're giving people information, they may not be startled when they hear you tick or see you tick. If you can prepare people in advance, they can be more educated and perhaps themselves feel less guilty about having a reaction, which they then can't control.
They
So
feel
I
more
think there's an
comfortable
issue
with
of
the
fairness
answers.
involved.
Right.
And people will make less of a judgment if they have that information, because there's a lot of assumptions and judgments that people will make. I've often had people say, you're very nervous. Well, I'm not nervous, I always move. And you asked about what to say, and I've asked my friends and coworkers, what do you need to hear? So I've got my spiels. I've got my 5-minute, my 10-minute, my 1-hour spiel. I've got my professional spiel. I've got my professional spiel, my friends, my relationship, and they're different based on what people need to hear. And I've just practiced it enough that, okay, I've got a new coworker, this is what I say. And if they ask questions, then you can go from there. But then at least I've informed them so that it's not something unknown that they're questioning, that they're wondering behind my back. And I actually have coworkers tell coworkers for me.
Yeah.
And eventually everyone's going to know what Tourette syndrome is.
And that's the whole point of this tour.
Yeah.
So I sort of had an agenda coming here. I wanted to meet someone like myself. And growing up, I was the only one. I never knew anyone with Tourette syndrome. I never saw anybody. I feel like I don't miss anything. So even if someone had like a slight eye tick, blink, movement of their neck, like a throat clearing, a voice alteration, I would pick up on it. And I would never dare ask them if they had Tourette syndrome, but I would assume that they had some kind of tic disorder. I was in a school play in my elementary school, and my parents noticed that I was the only kid up on stage blinking, like a lot, like blink, 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 and they had decided that there was something wrong with me. And then I started developing sort of OCD kind of tics, like where I would have to switch the light on and off like 10,000 times. And that was like my little secret. And then one day I think my father caught me doing it. And that became like, something else is wrong with Jill. And then the noises started when I was maybe like 10 or 11, where I had to like shout, just make just a shout, like one. I would do one, and then one turned into 5, it was like exponential. It just started going and going, and you know how sensitive children are to their parents' facial expressions, and myself especially. I'm an ultra sensitive person. I knew there was something wrong, and I was just terrified, It was like, I would cry every night. I would say, well, why do I have to do this, and what is this, and I don't know what this is, and I have to make these sounds, and I can't help it. And my parents read an article in Ann Landers or Dear Abby about some child who had similar tics. They had heard about this conference in Washington, D.C., And my parents went to the conference, and to them it was an epiphany. They were like, this is our daughter, this is what she has. And I think they were so determined to label me with something. They never would have been satisfied with, oh, this is just a problem our daughter has. Once it became Tourette syndrome, once it had a name, then it was a medical condition, and that they could handle. It was like tangible. It was like, now we can go to the doctor. Now we can say our daughter has Tourette syndrome. But they had the information, but none of the doctors they brought me to had the information. They considered it a nervous disorder, and nervous disorders had to be treated with downer type of medications, you know. So right away I was put on all kinds of tranquilizers, you know. I was like walking around like, I kind of liked it. And I don't fault anybody. It was just not, it wasn't something that was known about, you know. So I was kind of like a guinea pig in terms of medication. I took what was ever given to me.
So it's been 10 years since I've been diagnosed with Tourette's. It took them 3 years to diagnose me. I went through stages. I started off with loss of speech. Then that's the hitting started, and sensitivity. Like, I'm sensitive to everything, like noise and all that. So by the time I started the corporalia and swearing, that's when the doctor, I was amazed by him. That's when he actually started diagnosing me with Tourette's, is when I started the swearing. But what threw him off was my age. I was 33 when the onset hit me, which is very rare, because it's got to be onset by the age of 18 or 21. It took 3 years before they diagnosed me with Tourette's. Then when we were driving back from London, back home to Cambridge, I was smiling. Actually, I had a smile on my face and a bit of tears in my eyes, because they finally diagnosed me.
I think, and you're right, it can take so long. I know they say they need a year to diagnose, but there's so many factors that they take, that they try and rule out, and there's still not all that much information and knowledge out there.
No, it's what? Yeah, but I found when a doctor diagnoses you, he leaves you in limbo.
Well, you've got a diagnosis, but no information.
No information. He just, leaves you there hanging.
Started having tics when I was 7 years old. It was 5 years before I was diagnosed. But when I was diagnosed, that was 20 years ago, and there was no information out there. There's much more information now that doctors can access. And now there's brochures and books and support groups, and 20 years ago there wasn't that information, so you were given a label and then had to do something with the label. And now there's a lot more information, but it's only if the doctors know where to find that information. I just popped into the kids program for half an hour, and I think 5 kids came to me and said, hey, you've got Tourette's too, and they launched into conversation. Like, there was no, you didn't have to explain it, it just, you've got it too, you know, I can tell you this stuff. And it was very cool, so I did this, and I did this tic, and and they asked questions, and it was just an immediate common ground.
I think the times we're living in is very different than I remember being a kid, you know, like, being 42, I wish that I was 11 now, you know, at this conference. I sat for a while in a chair looking at the kids, you know, it was like, all right, Tourette syndrome. Me, it was like, oh my God, you know, I couldn't believe it. You know, I said, that is so great, you know, that is so great that a kid could have that feeling about himself or herself. I guess I was in a school where nobody else had Tourette syndrome because...
Well, they were all suppressing it too.
You know, maybe you're right. They could have been too. So I would have given anything to have like been in the schoolyard and met another kid with Tourette syndrome. Like, my dream was always to like meet someone with Tourette syndrome, my own age, who I could like sit and talk to, you know?
And you're going through the same stage we've been through.
That's why I say I feel like I'm 12 years old, you know, like I feel like I'm in the adult forum, but yet I should be sitting with the 12-year-olds who are just coming into their own, because, you know, you're developing your self-esteem, your identity. And my identity was that of somebody who was extremely flawed, you know, extremely damaged.
Like Daryl and that, I came into Tourette's later in my life. I didn't really have any symptoms till 18-ish. But similar to you, I had not met anybody my age with Tourette's until I met Gord and Daryl, which was what, maybe a year or so ago. And I guess when I was diagnosed, it's sort of that whole, I'm not perfect anymore. You know, I had a great life up until that point, and it was a denial thing. Until I finally could accept myself. You know what? I got a good job, I got a great wife, I got a family, I'm successful with a university, chartered accountant, all that stuff. You know what? So what, I twitch.
You genuinely feel that way. Like he genuinely felt flawed, and he felt like he wasn't as adequate as he was before. That's exactly what it was. He felt like he wasn't as good as he was.
You've accepted yourself, so you've went one step better than a person that hasn't got anything wrong with them. You have accepted the acceptance of Tourette's, so you've moved on to be a better person.
A good day is a day that you learn something new, and at the conference, it's a comfortable zone, and now we're learning something new about TS that affects our lives every single day. Because if you learn something new at work, that's great, you can use it at work. You learn something new when you go and play badminton. Oh wow, when you play badminton, you learn this new serve. But Tourette's affects your life every day. So you learn something new about Tourette's, it has a huge impact on your life. And we didn't realize that there was part of Tourette's is when you have sexual thoughts and you either act on them or you don't act on them. And we met someone at the conference that doodled. So they didn't verbally say anything, but they doodled their thoughts on a piece of paper, and that's how they got that out. And Jay would come by and either a making joke thing or any kind of gesturing or couple feel, however you want to say it. And I would always think in my head, oh my gosh, tonight again, my goodness, you know, like it meant something to me. To me, it meant he wanted something because it's a sexual thing. But to him, it wasn't the case at all. But here I'm feeling all this stress, that constant. And so then we went to the conference and someone was saying how they can, how this is just the way it is. That's part of Tourette's. And there was multiple people who brought up this topic. And I was like, that's you. I'm writing on pieces of paper during the conference, that's you. And ever since then, we have a comfort level that is so much better. It doesn't bother me. I don't even think about it. And it's gone. That part of our life is gone. And I was annoyed quite a bit about it before.
That's a big thing with Tourette's, is finding the compromises and the strategies of how to deal with certain things. Every relationship has their ups and downs and things that you need to deal with, and TS is just another factor of that. That you deal with strategies and you cope with other issues. That every family has their issues. Ours are just different, and you just work through it.
It's kind of a bonus sometimes for me because the compromises I make for him, I get my compromises back. So.
I'm intrigued by relationships between someone without Tourette's and someone with Tourette's, and I want to know how they really, really feel about their spouse or boyfriend. It's like, do you really love them and accept them, or is there part of you that like really hates their Tourette's and just puts up with it, you know? Because to me, that's what it would be, you know, somebody putting up with my Tourette's, not just loving me and ignoring it, or, you know, just saying, oh, it's just part of Jill. That's just who she is, and she has tics, so big deal, you know? Like, to me, I wonder, is it true, genuine love? Like, is a person with Tourette syndrome really lovable? I had a few different boyfriends, and I ended up telling them, you know, not right away, because to me, that's like, you know, it didn't seem important. It was like, is that me? Does that define me? You know, is that like, hi, I'm Jill, I have Tourette syndrome, you know, like, I would always wait, and I would always expect rejection. It's like the self-fulfilling prophecy, or what. I was like, I was waiting for the guy to say, Jill, you know, I like you, or I love you, or I want to be with you, but I can't handle the Tourette's, you know? But it never really happened. But there were a few guys that I went out with that I didn't think would be able to handle it, so I would end up breaking up with them. I'd rather end the relationship than tell the person about the Tourette syndrome, you know? But relationships have always been a problem with Tourette syndrome because as I said, I've always been ashamed of them, and I've never been proud of myself, and I never felt good about myself. And I think the recipe for success in a relationship is, you know, it sounds so cliche, but you're supposed to love yourself before you can love someone else. And because I never loved myself, I was convinced that I was never going to have like a good relationship. And I still think that, you know, at 42, you know, people ask me, are you married? Do you have kids? And I say no. And it's like, you know, right away people think, oh, there's got to be something wrong with this girl, you know, like she's, but I know in my heart that one day it will happen, that I will meet somebody, but only until I'm ready to accept myself fully, which I haven't yet done.
The conferences are a very calming environment because it's a free zone. You're welcome to be yourself, do what you do, and no one really looks at you very strangely other than going, hey, that's a new tick, I've never heard that one, or seen something like that. But you're not, you know, walking through a mall, people look at you, whereas at a conference, you're welcome to it. Go ahead, do what you have to do and be comfortable.
One of the reasons I went was a little bit to push Jay, just to get him out there a little bit, because it was still fairly new to us. But we're finding that our relationships, like everyone goes through their ups and their downs, and we may not even go through as many ups and downs because we talk everything through. We don't have a choice. It's there every day, and because ticks can change, and you can have one challenge for 6 months and then it'll go away, but you're given another challenge. So you just have to make the changes and adapt your life. So that's probably the biggest part, is communication, talking to each other and knowing what you're dealing with. And when every time you learn something new, it's just like, oh, wow, okay, we can do that.
And by coming to these conferences, you're also learning that it's not just us, everybody else out there is dealing with the same issues or similar type.
Anything you have to go through in your life makes you stronger. And this is something that we do every day. And we come through things. Like we do things where just small little instances that happen where Jay will be dealing with our youngest son, and he can be pretty stubborn. Well, when you have a person that has TS and is obsessive as well, and you've got a really stubborn child, it's the stubbornness, obsessiveness, and that's, I've got to step in at that point, like, because it's not going to go anywhere. And it becomes, okay, break it up, and I'll deal with this one. And then we'll talk about how can that happen next time. Because I shouldn't have to step in every time, which is understandable. We both agree to that.
It's developing the awareness of how I deal with issues, and developing a strategy to cope with that. And so, I mean, it's a continual learning process for us. Learning about myself, learning about the relationship here, and learning about the relationship with the kids. It's continual learning and coping.
I've never met another adult with Tourette's until that first conference. And Gord scared the hell out of me. He did the mistake of sitting beside me.
And I think the mistake was not that I was making noise or being loud, but it's just that we made this mistake of sitting in close proximity to each other, and we would set each other off. Whenever I would do this, I knew I was going to get bang. And but being somebody with Tourette's, we totally understood each other, and it was fine.
Because, and it has to admit, for some reason, when you go to a conference and you got people with Tourette's, you don't just pick up their tics, your body becomes relaxed. And you can do whatever you want.
And they come out a lot more, don't they?
Oh, they come out a lot more. But yeah, I feel so much better. I don't care if they come out bad. Because that's a free zone.
Yep.
That's a free zone. You can go in and do any tics you want. And nobody's staring at you, segregating you, and putting you into different areas.
They stare at the ones who aren't ticking.
Yeah, I stare at the ones, what are you doing here?
And we will tend to set each other off with our tics.
One lady brought a boy out because her boy had Tourette's, and brought her out to a support group meeting. And he was watching Gord and I tick. And he just laughed. And that's what I like to see, is laughter. He thought he was bad until he met you and me. And then the thing is, as soon as he met us, he was better. He was happy. He says, I have no problem dealing with things now. It says, if I had your shoes on, it'd be a different story.
Car is always a transition point for me from work to something, so it's a big release in the car. It's also, windows are closed, so you don't have to worry about sound traveling, things like that.
Part of you is focusing on the road, but your body is in a state of a little bit of tension because you have to focus on your driving. If you're in a state of tension to any degree, your tics tend to be exacerbated.
I'm driving alone, so I learned that that's the only tick I learned to hide underneath the dash.
It was very enlightening to see the wide range of tics and vocalizations and whatnot. You know, I am a very mild case compared to some of the other people that we have met here. And it's just been a wide-eyed opener, and it's been great from that aspect to be around other people in that way and see what it is, but also to talk to the ones who are married and get their viewpoints and from their spouses and that, which I think has sort of helped Stacy and realize our relationship is similar to other people's.
Yeah. A lot of people that were there didn't have their spouses there, and I found that a lot of the guys asked me, well, how do you do with this? Oh, you've got to meet my wife, and different things like that. And I was glad I was there.
I don't know if I'm the abnormal one. Like, I feel sort of weird being here, and I feel like the kind of person who someone with Tourette's would even judge and say, like, you make us look bad because you have Tourette's and you're ashamed of it, you know, and we're so proud of
like
it.
everyone else.
You're not ashamed of it, you're going through a bereavement stage.
Yeah.
What kind of bereavements?
You go, just like if somebody died and so forth, and you go through in the acceptance stage and you gotta get over the period of that person
There's a grief you
passing
have
on.
to deal with.
You gotta grieve and you gotta deal with it.
What would help is if you could make a mission statement for yourself and work towards some goals, starting small, progressing into larger arenas. Make it a goal to find a way and make a plan to accept yourself. That's the first step. Don't try to deal so much with other people's impressions right now. Deal with your own, your feelings towards yourself. If you can't find a support group, you can start a support group.
Right.
Educate yourself and bring other people in, and you will feel much better because as you reach out to other people, you are also helping yourself.
The more you talk about your Tourette's, the more comfortable you get.
One of the things you were saying is you never know what to say, or the people that you have met, you say, if you were going to say the 5 people you met, you said you have Tourette's, they're like, what's that? When I tell somebody, I will say I have Tourette's, which causes involuntary motor or vocal tics. Perfect. And I leave it at that. And if they want to know more, they'll indicate somehow that they want more.
The way I look at it, because I grew up the same way, I look at it as a dam full of water. You are expending all this energy trying to keep all that water back. And then by coming here, you may put a pinprick in that dam. And then one day that dam is just going to bust open. All that water's gone. You don't have to hold it up anymore. And you'll be surprised how quickly things turn around. It's not going to happen overnight because it took 30 odd years to get to that point. But it's not another 30 years to undo what that has done. And I know because I sit here now listening to you, and 10 years ago, I was you. And it took maybe 2-3 conferences and meeting people and having friends that...
You got 12 new friends in here now that accept you because you're new, not because of Tourette's, because the Tourette's doesn't enter into it because we all have it.
Right, but in my mind, I still can't believe it. And now I feel like I've been talking a lot, but it's like a very freeing experience, you know.
Which is what we told you half an hour ago, so now you know.
But everybody
You start accepting
always
yourself,
bothers me.
but people say about you or look at you strange walking through the mall, I for some reason, I just block it right out. I'm there for me, not them. If I become an entertainment show on the way, good for them. But that's it. But the thing is, I'm there for myself. You always gotta say, I'm here for me, and me only.
I don't want to put a negative damper or light on this, but I'm not at the acceptance stage. I'm not somebody who's like, you know, okay, I have Tourette syndrome, but the people that I met last night were all very optimistic and positive, and I've said to myself, what you have is bad, what you have is bad, what you have is bad. I've said it to myself so many times that it's going to take more than just like 2 hour session for me to suddenly say, oh, it's not bad, it's okay, and I can accept it and they can accept it, but it's definitely helpful, and it's definitely a start, and I believe you have to start at the beginning somewhere, you know. Well, when I arrived on Thursday, you know, I didn't know who I was going to meet. I didn't know what the people were going to be like. I had no clue, but not knowing produced all kinds of anxiety and fear. Because I didn't want to look in the mirror. I didn't want to look at somebody that had what I had. I didn't want, this was my thing. This was my problem. You know, I didn't want to, I didn't know what the face of Tourette syndrome looked like. You know, I didn't want to look in that mirror. because I never had. So I was terrified. And it struck me that, that in the forum when like Daryl would do something and then Gord would make a sound or a shout or say some kind of obscenity, that they were almost like laughing at each other, and it wasn't like, I guess I always, like, to me everything was like taboo. It was like, ticks are bad, and but they were like, to them they were taking it with like a grain of salt. It made me feel good, like I felt we were just laughing about it. Instead of crying about it, we were laughing, which is really something new to me, to talk to someone with Tourette's and actually laugh, like, oh, let me tell you about the time I did this and that, and it was kind of funny. It was different. Hey, if you were, like, when I go back to Montreal, I get on this little plane with the propellers and fly from London to Toronto and Toronto to Montreal, and I'm all kicked like, like I want to just scream, because I've spent 3 days talking about Tourette syndrome and my tics are bad, and I'm sitting in the plane and I'm sitting scrunched up next to this woman who's got her newspaper out, and I feel like moving my elbow to knock her newspaper, and I feel like letting out a scream, but I let out like a noise instead. What do I say? What do I say to this woman sitting next to me? Like when I make a noise, when I make a sound.
I got a whole flight to tell you about it.
Somebody mentioned it to me that they wanted to sort of continue the adult forum, but in a more informal setting.
A lot of the people that we had met, there was a few from the States that had come up, and they had been to many a conference. And that's a part of their ritual, is to have a meeting of the minds. Back in their hotel room, it's just them and the walls. And it's they're not in the restaurant, they're not in the bar. It's just everyone with TS and just saying their thoughts, saying their fears, and anything like that. So they were talking about it, and nicely enough, they had mentioned about letting Jay know. I don't know where you were at the time, and they said that I was welcome to come along too, which was very nice of them to let me come along. So we went back after, it was the following night.
It was the second day of the conference.
Second day of the conference. So we all went back to the hotel room, and it was just kind of they could be, no inhibitions, I guess would be the word for it. They could just be who they were.
Yeah, but it was nice just being in that environment where you're surrounded by your friends and you could talk about anything and everything as freely as you wanted. You get back in that, like you said, the four walls in the hotel room, and it was, any topic goes, and there's no worry about outside ears that may be
judgmental.
Judgmental or not approved. Yeah.
They didn't judge.
No.
They were everyone was so nice.
The nice thing is we look forward every year or every few years of getting together and just reuniting. It's just such a relief, a release of tension, and it's just so great. I'm married. I have 3 kids. All 3 of my kids, lovely, they have Tourette. Obviously, I have Tourette. My husband has OCD, but not TS. A lot of times he has to step in and send me to timeout.
He does.
I try to deal with my kids, and my Tourette, clashes with theirs or whatever, and so he'll.
She has a saint for a husband. No, really. I mean, her kids are great. I love her. But God bless her husband.
But absolutely, he does keep us together.
One thing that I think when you are in a relationship, that person being with you is a saint.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. Look at
they don't walk in our shoes. They can understand it. They can read about it. They can go to the conferences. But if you don't live it, you really don't ever understand it.
I'm coming up to my 24th anniversary.
God bless you.
Great.
My wife didn't come with me because she said one thing. She said, "You said you need separation."
Yes.
I need time by myself, and I get to come here, meet people that are like me, which is great.
Right.
We got 24 years of marriage under our belt, and 13 years of that was just with Tourette's. Because I never had Tourette's all my life, and it's just 13 years of Tourette's. And she stood beside me. There's one thing she said to me. On one of our anniversaries, says, "You're not the man I married, but I enjoy your love."
Oh, wow, that's good, that's good.
To me, I always thought the only man that would ever love me would be a man with Tourette's, you know? But I had never met anyone with Tourette's, so that made it impossible to have love because I didn't know anybody else with Tourette's, you know? So it's been a strange journey. Like,
You can't give
have to
away
find
what you
that.
don't have. You can't give love if
Exactly.
you don't have love to yourself.
And I've been very fortunate in my relationships that I have been with some wonderful people. I'm 43 now, and I think it's taken me up until, I think right before I turned 40 to understand this, that it was me that didn't feel good. And I ended all 3 marriages. I've been married 3 times. And I look back now, because hindsight being 2020, always being 2020 what it is, I look back and realize that I couldn't believe that they would love me. It's like, you're lying to me. How can you love me? Why should you love me? I'm this horrible person. I suppressed a lot in my relationships. I mean, if you called my first husband and said I had Tourette, he'd go, "I didn't see anything." Not that he wouldn't understand what Tourette was, but...
And I think in being in a relationship, that's the hardest part. Is the physical tics is easy to accept, but it's dealing with the internal stuff and educating your partner on the obsessions, on the compulsions, on the brain stuff. That's the hardest part that I find so challenging and exhausting. Trying to go into a relationship thinking, all right, here's the education. Because you can't just go into a relationship and it's the typical get to know you stuff. You got to always slide in, by the way I have, and this is what it means, and this is what it means to you.
So in addition to the regular dating stuff, you have the neurological.
And again, it's not like
Right.
a wheelchair. Like if you date somebody in a wheelchair, you know they're in a wheelchair. They can't go up the stairs, and they can't do this, and they can't do
But they
this.
still have the emotions and feelings of what put them in the wheelchair.
Yes.
You know, were they born that way, and you know, how was their life, you know, growing up, you know, that way, or, you know, was it a horrible accident, and their feelings and emotions? I mean, you still have to deal with all that with a person in a wheelchair.
Yeah, but we have our disability in our head part of it.
Right.
Right, so it's dealing with that cognitive
Absolutely.
stuff. And I think everybody with any disability, like, I think we all, again, we go back to, we all have that baggage.
Does everybody in the room here go to support group except me? Am I the only one, or everybody?
I run a support group.
I run a support
Yeah,
group.
I helped start
Do you
3
think
of
you
them.
would be able to get along without a support group, or you don't know where you'd be without one?
A support group, yes. A support system, no. What bothered me about getting involved with the people with Tourette was all my life it would have been back here. I could push it back. When I was doing support groups and speaking or having friends with Tourette, it was facing me. And that took me a long time to really deal with because it became a constant. And it was easy to try to forget or ignore it. And when you're around everyone, you can't ignore it. There was one time I was having lots of problems with my intrusive thoughts, and I didn't know what else to do. I picked up the phone, and he must have sat with me on the phone for a good 2.5 hours.
There's nothing like
And-
getting on the phone and
Oh,
talking.
yeah, and he
Right.
said, you know, just watch it go by like a parade. He says, it's not you, it's not who you want to be. And that's I think, very, very instrumental in my life when he said, it's not who you are, it's just there. Just watch it go by like a parade. And that was tremendous. And then, of course, Jay, and another one of my weepy moments, which I have a tendency to do around Jay or Kenny, is, you know, I told him, you know, you grow up feeling like you're insane. And I was going through one of, just as tics wax and wane, your moods or your acceptance of yourself can wax and wane. And I was in one of my down modes, and I said, you know, I just feel like I'm crazy. That it's getting the best of me. And Jay said to me, if you think you're crazy, then you're not, because crazy people don't know they're crazy. I think that's how I said it.
Yeah, that's right, it is, that's the truth.
And I think what makes us special is we all worry so much about ourselves that, like you said, if you could take it away, I don't know if I would want it to go away.
Right.
Because it's a wonderful self-check system in a way.
And I think everybody, no matter what you're facing in life, I don't care if it's, something that's going to take your life like cancer or leukemia or Tourette syndrome or biting your nails, you have to have some support. You have to know that there are other people out there that are doing the same thing you're doing. The feelings of, yeah, been there, done that, I'm willing to listen.
Yeah.
Never.
Just don't put your head through, that's all.
They're at it again.
If you have one person, if it's any of us that, you feel comfortable to call and talk to, that's a support group.
You gotta remember, support groups are just not meeting once a month. The support group's got a phone line.
Support is important. It's good to have a support group. It's direly important to have a support system.
Right.
Okay, I helped start 3 support groups.
We are your system right now.
I helped start
We're
3
the
support groups in the
starters,
western Pennsylvania area. My support system, one of my tics once in a while is to start picking at the cuticles and biting until they bleed. And I mean, that hurts. You can't use your hands for a day. I'm a firefighter.
And who do you call?
I call her. Now, the thing is, my fiance
sitting there
is
doing
the
the
most
same thing.
fantastic woman I've ever met in my life.
Love it.
But it drives her crazy that I have to call another woman.
And a couple of times I have come home, and on my answering machine, there's, where in the hell is everyone? Is nobody at home? And I know that he has needed support, so he's probably called Linda first. She's not there. He's called Kenny second. He's not there. And then by the time he calls me and I'm not there, he's really pissed. So you can tell, by his answering machine, just how bad he is.
For many, many, many years, I did the 1-800 hotline for Ohio in northern Kentucky. And I learned so much because, I was hearing stories, things that I could relate to all the time. It was a lot of support for me because you always find somebody.
Good job.
Do you need help?
You're on my bad side, I'm not gonna hit you. It's redirecting a tick.
Keep it that way.
Sit my kids. Yes.
Doing the 1-800 hotline was wonderful therapy for me. It was just so incredible. And I feel like, then I'd go to a conference and I'd meet the people that I talked to because they'd all come to the conferences.
Yeah, right.
And it's like, oh, you're the voice on the other end.
Yeah,
You're the one that saved my life or saved my marriage or, got me going with my kids or, help the teachers out. I would go away. My head would be like this, but I would feel great. I would feel great knowing that I was there for somebody. And, and it all goes back to, I was that person one day, picking up that line going, hi, my child was just diagnosed with TS, help me.
Yeah.
I was there. So the giving back was incredible.
We have supportive friends and supportive family, and I don't think, we met Jill at the conference, and very few people knew what she's gone through in her life, and we were some of the privileged people to learn about what she's been through in life, and that was amazing to learn her story. For ourselves, people have accepted, and Jay hasn't had to be, came on later in life, but he hasn't had to hide or go through anything of being embarrassed or having low self-esteem or in self-confidence issues. They've been very minimal. I'm going to be heading out, but before I go, we want to give that to Jill. And it's something
Something to remember us all by.
For you. We love you, Jill.
That's what the purpose of this is.
It's called Welcome to the Family.
Well, why don't you open it up first before you cry?
See, people do love you, and we don't really even know you that well yet.
That's okay. Every conference we nail somebody.
The conference was around Mother's Day weekend, and we had a break, and we had some last-minute shopping to do for Mother's Day, so we went to the mall across the road from the hotel where the conference was being held, and we were walking through one of those stores, gift shop stores, with all your little figurines and magnets and all the little doodaddy things, and we came through this one section, and they had this whole display of elephants. And Jill had mentioned previously that elephants was one of her favorite things, and
They're
she collected lucky and
it's the
whatnot.
one thing she finds happiness in is elephants.
And so we were looking at the different elephants in this case and the different phrases, like things about a friend is someone to lean on, and one's about statements about love, and just good, happy, solid things. And we kind of looked at them and we kind of walked away, and I think we actually made it out of the store and we went, did you see those elephants? And like we both immediately looked at each other and thought of Jill, and it's like, you know what, we got to do it.
Should I open it?
Yeah.
Wait a minute, get back. Boom!
Start swearing at her.
Uh-oh. Hey, there's some Kleenex there. Where are you going?
When did you do this?
Why not?
Oh,
No, but when?
when?
Oh, well, you think you know everything, huh?
That's what happened. We went, we picked it up and went back to the conference and talked to all the other people who was in that meeting of the minds, or well, I guess the Adult Issues Forum at that point. And, you know, I had bought the card and arranged for everybody to sign it and put their thoughts down, and it was just the perfect gift
Yeah, it was.
for her.
I'll have this. I will always have this, Fred.
Of course you will.
That's all it is.
We
is
have
paper.
no
That's
doubt.
it. Just a whole bunch of paper.
And it's yellow sunshine. There you go. You're a ray of hope.
I'm very touched, I have to tell you.
Good.
It's a box you open.
Oh, I've been in there. Is there an elephant?
I don't know. Find out. I didn't know anything.
If there's, I'm gonna like die if there's an elephant.
No, you're not gonna die. No, you're not. Nah, you're gonna live forever.
Today I was so terrified to come. It took me 20 years to get to a Tourette syndrome conference, and now I'm actually sad about going home.
I was
you
the
know?
opposite. I couldn't wait to get to my first one. I wanted to go yesterday. So
I always
Everybody's
cry.
different.
oh, you wimp.
Oh, shut up.
Cry then.
Okay, because I always cry at these things because I hate to go
I was gonna
home.
say, why would it be any different today?
That's right.
Special, you just can't imagine.
No, those people out there can't imagine.
You know,
We
that's,
can't.
you
Yeah,
can't.
that's true.
We can, again,
Right.
no explanation. There's an old saying: to those who have experienced it, no explanation is needed. To those who
right.
haven't, no explanation will do.
Like when we were at the meeting of the minds, people were talking about their spouses and how supportive they were and being understanding if they needed to call someone with Tourette's and even someone of the opposite sex to call them for support from that network. And from my standpoint, I'm there and I'm willing to listen and we talk. And I think I'm there more as a push in my case. I'm more out there. I want the information. I want to know what's going on. And I'm always, hey, look at this. Hey, let's go to this. Hey, did you see this? And I kind of nudge them along, I think, a lot of it. But basically, I'm just there. And I don't make an issue of it, and we just have fun.
I mean, it's great to have Stacey there that I can talk to in that, but she hasn't been through it. She hasn't lived it. And I think that's the point that Jay and Jillian and the others were making, is that, you know, we've got great spouses, but sometimes you need to pick that phone up and talk to another Tourette'er, to talk to somebody who's been through it, who knows what you're thinking and what you're experiencing. Whereas, you know, your spouse can offer you great support in many ways, but sometimes you just need that experience.
Well, that's like when they had the meeting of the minds, I left. I went in and said hello to everyone, and I was invited, and that was really nice of them to invite me. But then I left them to do their thing, because that was the whole point of him going, is to meet all these people and to experience it for himself and to know what it's like and to hear the other people's comments and to be able to say that one thing that maybe he's not ready to say to me, say it to someone else, and then maybe someday he'll be ready to say it to me. Because I don't expect him to be able to say everything to me. I don't think any husband and wife expects complete disclosure all the time. You have to feel comfortable. And I'm going through different things than he's going through. So by going to a conference, you get everything. You get as a Tourette'er, you get to meet a Tourette'er. As a spouse, I get to meet other spouses. As a child, you get to meet other children. And siblings meet siblings. Like everyone, can relate to somebody and you don't feel alone. You don't feel like I'm the only person going through this and how come it's me? Because now it's like, oh wow, you do that? He does that too? Like you're talking to another wife and they're saying, oh, don't you hate it when they do? Oh yeah, I know, I just hate it when they do that. Well, it's great because now you got someone else to talk about it to and that can maybe help you with strategies. If you don't have a strategy for something, someone else might. And just having that contact with those people, and that's a big part of it, is whether it's someone else's that we've met through a conference or a local meeting, someone there we might meet. It's just anywhere we go, we keep our eyes and our ears open.
And I love the fact that Canada has an annual conference rather than every 2 years.
Yeah.
Because we can go 2 years without seeing each
Yeah,
other.
before
And sometimes
we're in
even
Vancouver.
talking to each other. But at least we know we're there.
But we meet up again and it's like yesterday.
Yes.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
like,
no,
yes,
right.
We just pick right up.
Yeah.
You know, and it's funny because the doctors a lot of times at the conventions will ask, you know, if we find a cure tomorrow, would you want the cure? And a lot of us just say no. Because, you know, who would we really be?
Right.
I mean, or what would it change in us? Would it take away our
No, take that
creativity, our artistic, our sense of humor? You know, I'm not sure I would want it.
I mean, but for some reason I had one day in my life, and since I can recall, and I woke up and I didn't have a tick the whole day. And I was out with people and I was doing things and I said, oh my God, my ticks are gone. My ticks are gone. But I didn't know what to do about it. I was like, I couldn't tell anybody they were gone because I never told anyone I had them to begin with. So I couldn't say, well, now they're gone. What's gone, Jill? Oh, nothing, you know. It was like, but I walked around all day like, oh, I have no ticks today. Oh, I was so happy I was walking around. I was like, I have no ticks, I have no ticks, I have no ticks. And then the next day they came back and it was like, they're back. And I sunk, but I really sunk. For days I was like, I was so filled with sadness. But that one day of elation, but it wasn't because of my identity. It was just because it was a relief for my throat, for my eyes, for my neck. At that time I had a really bad neck tick and I had neck pain all the time. I had a loud throat tick, my throat hurt, my eyes hurt, I have headaches every day. For the last 10 years, I have a headache by the end of the day from either rolling my eyes or doing whatever I do. So for that one day, it was like, I said, you know what? I wouldn't trade having the ticks, only except for the comfort level, for the comfort, to be able to just like sit quietly and peacefully. People have said, try meditation, try relaxation. I'm afraid to go to like a yoga class or somewhere where there's quiet because I'm afraid of
I've been to
quiet,
yoga classes and it's comfortable.
Yeah,
I sit back
you don't
and
feel like you have to tick in where everybody's like
I've ticked and they
quiet.
just sat quietly, but my problem is I started snoring. I got too relaxed.
You need your CPAP.
You know what
I need a seat back, yeah.
Jill, you know what somebody told me a long time ago? My ticks wax and wane, and especially at my job as a firefighter. Very stressful, and you know I don't tick at a fire or something like that, but afterwards I do. And I went through a day where I didn't tick, and I thought it was fantastic, and it was worse. I ticked mildly. The next day it come back even more, and one lady I think it was looked at me and said, "Jay, celebrate the small victories.
That's right.
Yeah.
Be glad for that one day."
But you're right about the small victories. It's like I should really take a pad of paper and write down like this moment of receiving this card and these
So
elephants.
you never
and-
would have had that if it wasn't for Tourette.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's different for different people. Like when we found out, Jay went through the different stages of denial or why me and well, what is it? And it was actually a relief for me. It was like, oh, okay, now we can deal with something solid. It wasn't out there because a lot of times before that, it just seemed like there was no answers for anything. Now we had some answers.
Sense of relief.
Sense of relief.
Everything's got a name. It's, you know, once we had a name for this and we knew that it was just this disorder and it wasn't any life-threatening disease or anything in that aspect, you know, it's a lot of information being out there on this disorder and that it's got a name and you can tell people this is why I do it, not just, you know, I'm weird or a freak or whatever the self-esteem issues there are. It's a neurological disorder that you can't control. Okay, great. I know what it is. Let's move on. Life goes on. But there's still that huge denial aspect, like Stacey was saying. You know, I'm not perfect anymore. Luckily for myself, as she said, I had a great upbringing and didn't really, show any symptoms till 18, 20-ish, and diagnosed at 30, my self-esteem luckily was in check, and took a couple steps back, but it wasn't that hard to get back on track to realize that, you know what, we can deal with this, we can work through it.
Then with his parents, they went through huge denial and blame. They blamed themselves. Why didn't we know? How did we didn't figure it out? When we told them that he had Tourette's, they said, "Are you going to die?" That was the first thing they said. And then we tried to describe more and more in detail what it was, but they left thinking that he was going to die. And when people think, they shut down other information until they're willing to accept the information. So if someone thinks that this is their fault, if you grew up having Tourette's and your parents blame themselves for giving you Tourette's because it is hereditary, then it's going to take a long time before they are going to accept the fact that you have Tourette's, because they're blaming themselves. I think you hit on a point there about the information being out there. We were lucky. At 30 years old, we had internet and we had the information. And when we went online, we could find things and we could contact an association, and all this information was there. You compare it to Jill's situation, and Jill is a few years older than we are, and she had
Diagnosed many years prior to I was.
Yeah, she was diagnosed as a child. So the information wasn't as readily available, and that's one of the key factors, is when you can talk to other people and when the information is readily available to you, it makes a huge difference, and there isn't misconceptions and there isn't stereotyping and all that happening. You can get the facts and you can feel more comfortable, and when you can sit in a room full of people. This was Jill's first time meeting someone that had Tourette's, as an adult that has Tourette's, and that must have been, I can't even imagine how amazing that would have been to her. Like, what was it like the first time you met Gord or Daryl?
It was a great experience to meet somebody else, to, like I said, see the spectrum of things and realize there are other people out there with this disorder that, you know, they're both great lives and whatnot, and they deal with certain issues, and you can learn from that. And it's just
You're not alone.
You're not alone. I was going to say, it's almost a sense of relief to meet other people in the same situation that you are in.
As much as in the initial stages there's a lot of denial, that we could be in denial that I don't have this, I don't have it, we're still doing things that people notice.
Yeah.
I think some of them become so subconscious we're just doing them. I know that we know we're doing them, but had friends come, "Oh, so you're doing this tick again?" I'm like, yeah, people do, they notice it, and they won't say anything until we've said something to start it off. That
that's
people, again, they don't know what to say, and oh yeah, I knew that, or I kind of suspected something, because things aren't just 100% right in our worlds, that they're different. Like, we're doing visual, physical, noisy things.
I find the
the
more I tick, and the more my family accepts it, they've even come up to me, my niece comes up to me and says, "I found another kid with Tourette's."
Yeah.
And then they have accepted this. And they said, "Well, I know how to get you help. This is to phone this guy." And then my phone number's getting out quite a bit. But the thing is, I'm willing to help.
Yeah.
And explain it to them. But
There is a process of dealing with Tourette's from the day you're diagnosed to however you deal with it, whatever you want to call it. There is a process that we all go through, whether there's official label and 12 steps to self-discovery, or whatever you want to call it.
I think the hardest thing is when I was diagnosed, I was happy. I actually found I had a name.
As I was, yes.
Yeah, myself as well.
Yeah.
Finally, there was a label and
the second thing I had to go through, I had to tell the people at work that I worked with. And that was hard. I had to tell my family. I got on the phone. And I think the more you talk about it, the more you accept it. The more you hide in you got to come out of the closet. That's your main point.
And how and when you do that is hard, because I know
It's hard.
I was diagnosed when I was quite young. I was happy that I had a diagnosis, and then I went on medication and came off my medication at the end of puberty, and suddenly had all these tics again, and went, "Oh my God, why me? And I can't deal with this, and what's going on with me?" And went through all of that again at a later stage, and and then came around and went on to doing the things that I've been doing.
With the stages of acceptance, it's not going to be something that it's point A to point B, and it's not going to be a straight line. There are going to be setbacks. You're going to be, hey, have things been really good for a while, and then, oh, no, some really bad ticks, some hard time from people. You're going to move back, and you may revert back to, say, some depression or why me, until you get to that final acceptance. So it's a real ongoing process that will take years.
And I know that when we met Jill, she's really struggling with that, and she's still doing her best to figure out who she is with this disorder, whether it defines her, she defines it, and going through that process, whether it's anger, frustration, whatever emotions you go through. I think we all go through them differently at different times, and like you said, we go back and forth.
I think you just, at one point, you just got to sit back, cry, get over it, show your emotions. Then you got that one step of moving on.
And that can be a really hard step to go from, if you've been living it for so long,
Yeah.
how do you move on? Like that's a new stage. All of a sudden you're telling people, you're talking to people, it's a defining part of who you are, and it's a redefinition of who you are.
I found more of my acceptance came by going out and speaking in groups. The more I talked about it, the more I accepted it.
Yeah.
Also
And you get more
to-
articulate in how you talk about it
And
as
how
well.
I talk about it.
Also coming to conferences, because you're going to meet people with Tourette syndrome at all these different stages as they're going along. And somebody early in the process, like Jill, might look at some of the other ones and say, hey, they're doing okay, and they got somewhat the same tics as I am. They can maybe learn self-esteem issues and coping mechanisms from those of us who have been down the road a lot longer and have developed these coping mechanisms, and say, hey, that might help me, to get further along. If they can do it, why can't I?
And even though it's ongoing, like I think I've got a good sense of who I am, but it's still nice to go to conferences, hang out with you guys, and it's so acknowledging to just, again, hang out and let loose and just be reminded that I'm not so alone out there.
Well, you missed the rap session we had. Oh, man, it was unbelievable. They went in like 15 minutes. I kicked them out an hour and a half later.
So the coming out and I think everything that you do in life is a process. It's like there's no quick fixes, there's no miracle cures, there's no like today I feel bad about something and then somebody says something to me and then the next day I feel good and everything's changed. So I think there's got to be a period of where I take all in what I've heard and how I feel and let it just sit for a while. And then perhaps the epiphany comes, or, like the eureka effect, where you have all of this information and you feel that you want to accept yourself and love yourself and accept the disorder, but I know it doesn't happen overnight. So perhaps something that happened or was said yesterday will stick with me consciously, subconsciously, and in a time where I get to make the choice of, do I want to feel good or do I want to feel bad? Do I want to tell someone? Do I not want to tell someone? Something will happen because of this, But I think it's too soon to tell in terms of like, did it change you or do you feel different?
We will try to attend every conference we can, because the relationships that we built at these conferences were amazing. We went to the adult forum that was supposed to be an hour or 2 hours, and it was however many hours, and then we went to the bar after and stayed for 5 or 6 hours. And I met everybody. I know all their names. I know what they do for a living. These people are amazing people, and we keep in contact. We email each other. I've been out to Montreal to visit Jill when I had to go out on business, and she took me out for dinner and showed me all around Montreal. And there's not a lot of things where that happens. I've been to many conferences, either with work or with other activities in life, and it's not the same. You don't come out of it feeling like you've met another member of your family.
Maybe it'll be through emailing these people that I've met, through asking more questions, dealing with particular problems, like if I were to meet somebody and have to tell them about Tourette syndrome, seeking advice, following that advice and having it have a positive outcome, and then say, hey, this really works. Because, you can go to a conference and get information, but I think the proof is in the pudding, when you actually take it out into the street and say, is this going to work for me? Is this going to work to go up to people and say, I have Tourette syndrome, you know? And so I haven't really tried it yet.